Hello and welcome to Drishtikon. I'm your host Desh Kapoor. Today we'll explore an explosive topic, Canada's long history of supporting Khalistani terrorism. From Pierre Trudeau to Justin Trudeau and how the consequences of this support have unfolded over decades. This episode isn't just about the strained diplomatic relations between India and Canada. It is about how Canada has become a breeding ground for terrorism with little to no accountability. Let's start with one of the darkest chapters in modern aviation terrorism, the Air India Flight 182 bombing. In 1985, 329 people lost their lives when a bomb planted by Khalistani extremists exploded mid flight over at the Atlantic. On the same day, another bomb exploded in Japanese airport, killing two baggage handlers. Despite the Royal Canadian Mounted Police RCMP and Canadian Security Intelligence Service CSIS being aware of these plots well in advance, the investigation was riddled with failures and cover ups. Evidence that could have been prevented, the attack was ignored, and terrorists responsible, including Talwinder Singh Parmar, were allowed to operate freely within Canada. The investigation and the subsequent trial were a disaster, with key witnesses retracting statements due to intimidation and others being killed mysteriously. Despite overwhelming, despite overwhelming evidence, most of the perpetrators were acquitted, leading to a public outrage with no accountability from the government at all. This failure has haunted Canada's judicial system and remains a glaring example of how Khalistani terrorism and Khalistani terrorists were given a free pass under Canada's legal framework. The support for Khalistani elements isn't limited to just one single incident. Pierre Trudeau, the former Prime Minister and father of Justin Trudeau, refused to extradite known terrorists like Talwinder Singh Parmar to India, setting a precedent of Canada offering refuge to terrorists. Under Justin Trudeau's administration, this legacy has not only continued but deepened. In recent years, we have seen the Trudeau government openly engage in Khalistani terrorist sympathy and sympathizers under the guise of community outreach. Even as the RCMP acknowledges the presence of Khalistani terrorists, no meaningful action has been taken to curb their influence. Trudeau's government has instead been accused of protecting these elements, a reality highlighted by the recent RCMP statements suggesting that India is targeting these extremists or terrorists through organized crime networks like Bishnoi Mafia Gang. The recent admission by the RCMP that Khalistani terrorists are protected from perceived threats raises questions about Canada's claim to being a nation governed by rule of law. If RCMP itself shields these terrorists while making unsubstantiated accusations against India, it reveals a very troubling pattern. Canada not only provides sanctuary to terrorists, but also facilitates their actions under the guise of human rights and freedom of speech. This blatant disregard for international norms raises serious questions. How can Canada claim to be a responsible state while harboring and enabling terrorists? This behavior not only jeopardizes diplomatic relations with India, but also places innocent lives, both in India and Canada, at grave risk. Politically, Justin Trudeau's minority government is more vulnerable than ever, with NDP, Jagmeet Singh's party, withdrawing its support. Trudeau finds himself without a stable coalition. And polls indicate a looming conservative victory in the next election. His reliance on the Khalistani support, which is Jagmeet Singh's party, for domestic political gains has come at the cost of alienating India, a crucial partner in global geopolitics. India's response, however, has been very decisive. properties linked to the Khalistani terrorists have been seized, and their Overseas Citizens of India OCI status has been revoked. If Trudeau continues down this path, he risks not just diplomatic isolation, but also being implicated in international terrorist activities, just like Pakistan has been. Canada must now decide whether it will continue down this dangerous road or finally act against the terrorists it has sheltered for decades. This episode makes one thing very, very clear. Canada's support for terrorism is not accidental, it's systemic and deeply entrenched. From allowing terrorists to walk free after the Air India bombing to sheltering terrorists under Trudeau's government, Canada's actions reveal a very troubling complicity that undermines its claim to being a responsible democracy governed by the rule of law. As India tightens its crackdown, the question remains, how much longer can Canada protect these elements without facing serious consequences? If it doesn't act soon, Canada may find itself increasingly isolated on the world stage, much like the states that use non state actors to destabilize rivals. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Drishtikon. If you found this discussion insightful, please share it and subscribe to the podcast. For more detailed analysis, visit drishtikon.com. It is a detailed and an insightful weekly newsletter that comes out every Sunday. Please subscribe to it and get insights that the top think tanks, industrialists, politicians, and thinkers get to read. Thank you.